Right? I know there are more women to follow, but it's really awesome to be first. And probably timely since we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion in the Web3 space. So it's so good to see women. So if there are women out there, we should bring them in. When we were talking about the topic for the whole conference, and we were talking about the pursuit of purpose, I couldn't help but feel like, it's such a big word, purpose, and we've heard it a lot, that I really wanted to make sure that we could get to the roots and have the discussion around, like, what really is this Web3 space, and how do we apply it to our life? And how do we as humans still fit in this wonderfully interesting time in our history? And you've heard lots of conversations and products around the metaverse and everything just so wonderful around products. We're going to bring it to the human level in this talk because, of course, I'm a woman. We can't help ourselves. When we think about the roots, the thing that I found most fascinating when we think about it is roots can be roots from trees. They are your own personal roots. Everyone here has a root story, where you've come from, where you were born, your family. In the history of technology and even in the history of the world, there's these roots. And oftentimes we try to pluck them out, but we all know that roots are just roots. And so as I've been traveling around in Spain, I've been here since the very first of April. I was here for the Cello Connect talk, and then I decided to stay. And I thought, well, there's no point going back to Canada where I'm from, because then I got to turn around and come back. So I decided to travel, and I went to this town called Seville. I'm not going to say it right. I apologize for those that are Spanish. And I went to this park named after a woman, Maria Luisa, who was a queen, one of the previous queens, and I came across this tree. And so I took this picture. Yes, I didn't have my daughter with me. She's here today, but to teach me how to work the camera on the phone properly, because there probably is better filters. And I was looking at this tree, and I just thought, well, what a wonderful example of the internet, of us as humans, of nature, of Earth. And if you look, they're all different. They're all going in different ways, but still speaking together. And Sep, who's a really good friend of mine, he's one of the founders of Cello, is the blockchain. We're going to talk about them. They're our partner. And he tells me this story that there's this really wonderful intelligence system amongst the forest, amongst the trees, that within this is something called mycelium, often found in mushrooms. Probably when we're all on shrooms, we talk to trees. Could be a connection, I don't know. But through this is this wonderful connective tissue where they all speak together, and then they work in community together. And so as a founder that's now in the music industry, in Web3, which I am not from the music industry. This is my third startup. I've been in the industry of technology for 13 years. If you told me that a girl from Regina, Saskatchewan was going to be in the music industry, you'd be worried, because the music would probably be like Corey Hart, maybe like Tragically Hip. You're laughing because you're the only other person that knows of Corey Hart. Maybe some Sarah McLachlan and throw in a Bon Jovi, and I would be suddenly really happy. So you'll be happy to know that I do not decide, and I am not the tastemaker on our platform. I leave that up to all of the community. But we have to look at how does someone end up coming to where they come to. Anybody know who this person is? This is Liberace. Now, May 12th, 1975, Liberace decided to go to Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. What in the Sam Hill would he ever go? If you've ever been to Saskatchewan, just imagine Texas, but in Canada. Flat prairies, farmers. But Liberace decides he's going to go to Regina, Saskatchewan. And my mother decides she needs to have tickets because Liberace's coming. My mother plays piano. And this was supposed to be the day of my birth. But she had a scheduled C-section, so she said, I'm going to have the baby on Monday because I'm going to go see Liberace on Saturday. And so my mother was at Liberace concert on May 12th in 1975, the day I was supposed to be born. And so 6 years later from that time period, the piano was a topic of conversation once again in my life. My father, who had decided in many sad circumstances, his addictions and his demons took him away. And I remember my mother saying, well, he took the car, but he left the piano. And so my mother went door to door asking if anybody needed a piano lesson because we didn't have any money. And she was worried about food. But all she knew how to do was to play that goddamn piano. So she went to the neighborhood, and then the neighbor found out that we didn't have any money and that we didn't have any food. So in Canada, in the 80s, if you immigrated to Canada, they sent you to Saskatchewan because it's the coldest fucking place on earth, and who wants to live there anyway? So they sent everybody there. If you can survive a winter in Saskatchewan, you can move to any other part in Canada. So they all come into Canada, they come to Saskatchewan, and so my neighborhood was full of families from all over the world. And they all decided that they should feed me. And so I'd sit at their tables, and I'd listen to their music. And the families from Jamaica were asking, will it ever warm up here? Sadly, no. And there was this really interesting theme that was playing through that time. And I look back now that I learned fundamentally at the roots a couple of truths. And those truths are still true today, sadly, and they are playing out in our technology and our economic systems. The number one truth is that the financial system is not built for single mothers. It's just not. The second fundamental truth is that the financial system is not built for women or people of color. It's just not. It's not that people are cruel. It's not that this is always intentional. It just means that it wasn't built for them. We were built to work in it, but we weren't meant to financially prosper. And that is part of the Roots story that I really want you to grab into, which is the financial inclusion story that ultimately comes forward in Web3. So the roots, that's number one. Soil. Some people say the soil is like the soul. And now we all eat vegetables. We don't necessarily ask what's in the soil. But when you're from Saskatchewan, you talk about soil. Because if you have crap soil, you really can't grow anything if the soil's crap. Now, the important part about the soil for me was thinking about, in Web3, we talk about these blockchains. You've heard the term blockchain. It's really important. The chain is where all of this wonderful part of everything that we're talking about, all these products that it actually lives on. I like to call it the soil. It's the community. It's what nurtures it. It's a vitally important part, but yet in Web3, we don't necessarily ask it because we're just going where everybody is. Where everybody is isn't necessarily the best place for you. But what's in the soil is so important. So as a founder, now the third time, we have many choices because we're builders. So these chains, the different chains, they'll court you and they'll say, come build your product here. Bring your invention here. So I read the white papers because I'm a woman. We read the map. We stop, we read. So I read the map. I read everything from Ethereum to Tezos. I looked through the chains, and I wanted to know what was at the heart. Because if you know anything about soil, that over time it can get better, and over time it becomes really important. Because it's the fundamentals of that that are ultimately what drive it. So when I met with the founders of Cello, they talked to me about a concept called sacred economics. Anybody familiar with sacred economics? There's a wonderful video. If you could please go to cello.org, watch a video by Charles Eisenstein. It's 12 minutes. It will save your life. And sacred economics really talks about our relationship to the earth. And it really talks about how the earth is always giving us things for free. And we are taking them, and we are repackaging them, and selling them back to us. The most important example of that is water. I have water here. Could have come out of the tap for free, but we put it into these wonderful plastic bottles. I'll take a sip of the water. And we sell it back to you. In sacred economics, it's about the gift. But right now, what we've done is we've pillaged so much from the earth, now she's pissed off. Is she pissed off? She's a little pissed off. If you want to see an angry Canadian, go to British Columbia in August when the entire place is on fire. And when I say pissed off Canadian, it's kind of an oxymoron unless you live in Quebec. We love the French. The interesting thing about it is the fact that in this past year in British Columbia, a town called Lytton was the hottest place in North America. And everyone went, oh my God, it's 55 degrees Celsius in Lytton. And within 24 hours, the entire town burned to the ground. Gone. All of it. Nothing left. Not a building, nothing. Gone. We went, yay, Lytton's hot. Yay, Lytton's gone. 24 hours. And exactly 2 months later, she was covered in water, flooded. Talk about irony. I think the Mother Earth has a wonderful sense of humor. Could potentially like watch Monty Python or something and had this wonderful sense of humor. Because if you really want to know what's happening in the earth, you could look at that as a really good example. So when I started to talk to Cello, I knew that they were the only net negative chain, because built into the actual white paper of it is the fact that it can have what is called a regenerative economy. The second component that's really important. So when we talk about the conditions of prosperity, what we're really talking about is financial inequality. And what we're really talking about, the conditions of prosperity, whether it's the earth, our financial system, or our creativity. In order to have the conditions of prosperity, we need to be aware of what that actually means. And what it actually means is that we have these seeds, the third component of that. And the seeds are all of our beautiful creativity. Now, there was a gentleman that was up here just before me talking about the venture capital industry. So the venture capital industry, we love them-ish. They have right now, as of today, at the end of the year, 99% of all venture capital money went to white potatoes. That's the seeds, white potatoes. Do you ever look at a menu? Do you notice that potatoes are never by themselves? They are always served with something else. They are always spiced with something better. But yet, 99% of all the money went to white potatoes, and 1% went to women and people of color. So when we're talking about the seeds, these are the seeds that fundamentally change lives, but if we're going to go back to the roots and repeat some of the same mistakes, going to the soil of where we plant, thinking about the seeds, it's really important where all of our creativity lives. Now, within Web3, there's this beautiful thing happening. There's all this creativity. We've gone from consumption, and now we're in this time of ownership, of sharing. And at EQ, the most important thing for me when I was putting this company together was, how do we honor the past? How do we extract the seeds that are valuable to learn? How do we transform those and ultimately breathe life and healing back into all of us? And that was, for me, the most fundamentally important thing as a founder. That where I planted, what I did, that these are the seeds of my company, EQ. Equality, equity, equilibrium. Equilibrium for me is the most important because we're kind of all out of balance. We're swinging through this. And if we look at our earth, she's kind of out of balance. We're just out of balance. We can't have all white potatoes at the table. We need to have a blend. We can't have it's all this and we can forget about that. We need to extract it and bring it together. So for us at EQ, we don't call our NFTs, although we offer those. We call them the mutual exchange of gifts, MEGs. We call them MEGs because I'm also a woman. So we call them MEGs because we believe that really it's about the equality between creator and collector, that there is this equal amount of time for you that have put this together, for I that may decide to buy it. And it's a mutual exchange of gifts. And within that system, these are the core values that we live by. Because we feel that as a platform and as a technology, we shouldn't be taking more than what is our fair share, which means we're just here to facilitate the mutual exchange of gifts. That's it. We don't touch your music. We don't control your music. I don't believe in it. Why would I do the same thing that you're already pissed off about from the last 40 years? It makes no sense. Why would I steal your time, which is what we've done in Web 2, steal your gift, repackage it, and sell it back to you? That's illogical to me. That's not a sacred economic way of being. And where we choose to build, that it needs to be regenerative. Can it just by virtue of existing actually do something for the planet? That's what I loved about Cello. It just exists. and you're already creating change. Because 40% of that chain actually goes to back natural assets to actually save the planet. How fantastic. Great, you mean I don't have to rinse all that shit out of the cans and figure out which one that goes in the bucket. That just by virtue of the presence, it actually is doing that. And that for me was really important. So how does this all come together? Some of you may know what these are. These are tape cassettes. Does anybody in this room know what tape cassettes are? Do we have a few? We have a few. This is what they used to look like. This was really pre-metaverse. Like pre. It was very revolutionary when they went into a tape case. So my dear dad, on that day in 1981 where my mother's life was changed and the piano became the figure, you'll be happy to know that my mother is still torturing young children with theory lessons in piano at the ripe old age of 78. She is still teaching piano. A couple of months ago, I got a phone call after decades being gone out of my life that my dad was dying. And I hadn't seen him. My sisters warned me that he had dementia and that he was very sick. My dad spent most of his life living atop of the bar. And in Saskatchewan, they have old hotel bars, and they have these one-bedroom rooms on top of them. And they said that I should go and see him, but that he probably wouldn't remember who I was. And so I went. I was very nervous. He's been gone from my life for 40 years, you know, sporadically showing up. And at first, he didn't know who I was. Then he said, "Jan, what's your favorite tape?" That's what he said to me. "What's your favorite tape?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, Simon and Garfunkel, of course." And he was gone. I came back, and about a month later in the mail, I got these. And on the note was, "You were always loved." My dad's treasure was music. 7 cassette tapes ended up in my possession for something that many of you have been a part of and created, that a man's treasure could be found in music. So when someone asks me, "How are you in the music industry?" I tell them that the piano saved my mother and the music was my dad's treasure. And so this is how we all become connected. Now, for you in the electronic music industry, my first experience was in 1996 in Brighton, UK. Anybody been to Brighton in the 90s? Well, I didn't know what Brighton was really about because they didn't have Google back then, and we just went. And for the first 2 months, I was like, why in the hell can I not get a date? I go, it's because I've got hips. So I was convinced that Englishmen didn't like women that had hips. And then my stylist informed me that I'd moved to the gay capital of UK, and that's why I couldn't get a date. So then I went down to the fish and chip shops and ate until my heart was content, and I was so happy. And Norman, who I lived with, a fabulous queen, said, "Janice, you need to have your first experience at a music concert." I said, "Great, who's playing?" is what I asked, because I'd never been to one. And he says, "We're going to go to a dance music rave." That's how he described it to me. I'm like, "Awesome, what do I wear?" He said, "Be comfortable." Norman was not. He was fully dressed as a queen should be. We got up to the place to go, and this man was selling candy. I'm going to say that he was selling candy because my daughter's in the room. I'll let you use your imagination. He was selling candy. I went and asked him all the questions I thought should be asked. And about 30 minutes in, he said, "I really don't think this woman should have candy." He said it wouldn't be good for her. I fear she may talk all night, after I asked him about 20 million questions. Norman said, "You're probably right, but let's give her half and see what happens." So I went to my very first concert with half of a piece of candy. I talked all night long to anyone that would listen to me. And towards the end, Norman said to me, "How was your first experience?" I said, "It was riveting. I solved all the world's problems at this concert." He said, "I bet you did." My next one subsequently, living in Brighton, I never did take any more candy, but I loved them. And the thing that I found most fascinating about them was how it felt like I was transported to a different time. And one of the previous talks had talked about the electronic music industry being futurist. So as I've traveled through Spain, one of the most amazing futurists came from the Queen Isabella here in Spain. Now, some of you may not know this, but it was actually Queen Isabella that decided that Christopher Columbus should go discover the Americas. Ferdinand didn't like him. So she on the side gave him the money. It was a woman to go and discover Americas. And what he discovered when he got there was our gorgeous Aboriginal First Nations communities of the Americas, who were really the first stewards of the earth. They were the first protectors. So right here in Spain, where all of you are, as futurists, you are the first protectors now. It's been passed. And through your music and through your joys of your creativity, you can really lead these conversations around prosperity for all, around the environment, around why this is really important, why we need to think about not only the roots, the seeds, and the soil, but how we're all ultimately all connected. And although all of these things that we are putting on this beautiful Web3 space are fun and interesting and metaverse and NFTs and digital coin this, at the end of the day, we're all humans. And we all need to be healed. And at the end of Sacred Economics, Charles Eisenstein says one thing. He says, we really need a miracle. We really need a miracle. And I believe the miracle can happen here. And I believe that if we start to ask the questions about what we can actually do with this technology, we can really look at diversity and inclusion, which has its heart in really solving these problems around financial inequality. That's the entire point of the Web3 space. So we are very happy to present for you today our very first activations on EQ from your community. Of course, we had to have the women. And oddly enough, when Selva sent his record for us to play for you, which we're going to play, it was called Raindrops. He didn't know about my talk, and I didn't know about his song. But isn't that kind of fitting how the universe always works? It's called Raindrops. And so we asked that you go to EQ. These are just going to be the pre-sale launches of their NFT. We will be providing 3 $1,000 CUSD, Cello USD. At the back of the room is a wonderful woman named Sandra from Cello and Cello Foundation. If you really care about this planet, you need to go see her. The climate collective that is part of Cello, what is going on in that organization, what is revolutionary all over the world, that net negative, it is the only net negative chain that exists in the world today. You need to go there. It will technically provide everything that you need and then some, based on a regenerative economy. And for us at EQ, we ask that you support. We are the only female-led music NFT platform in the world. We're it. So we ask for our brothers and our sisters to support our journey, because at EQ we do really believe that it is the emotional connection amongst all of us, the EQ amongst all of us, that ultimately really matter. So thank you for your time. I will be here. I may be dancing later. There could be a very high probability. And if you think Elaine from Seinfeld's a band dancer, you just wait. But if you gave me cocktails, you may see one of the most extraordinary displays in the back corner of wherever that is, at a side table, of course, because my feet get sore, because I'm old, that I'll need to sit. So if I have a chair and a table for my drink, my child's over there. Say hi to my child, Shibe. Plug your ears, earmuffs. I will be having a fine goddamn time tonight. How about all of you? Thank you.